Derby County are reportedly targeting a loan move for Leeds United youngster Harry Gray, and it's a potential move which could go through during the January transfer window. Now, Harry Gray is currently 17 years old. He's got 5 caps for England's under-17s and has also been a part of that Leeds United first team over the course of a couple of different occasions. Now, obviously for Derby County, this is a huge moment as it means Derby County are willing to let players go over the course of the January transfer window. And that is the only way that Harry Gray can join Derby. Now, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. But let's get into it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is a loan move which, to be completely honest with you, I'm not entirely sure that I agree with. Harry Gray, at just 17 years old, he is a forward by trade, apparently a centre forward. I just don't necessarily think this is a move that Derby County need to make, if I'm completely honest. I think it's one which doesn't make a great deal of sense, if I'm completely honest. Now, Derby aren't the only club interested. There's Charlton, there's Swansea, there is Hull City, who are all looking at potentially getting this deal done. But it's going to be interesting to see what actually does happen. Now, his contract at Leeds United expires in 2027. And as a 17-year-old, he obviously needs that first team experience over the course of the next few years. He's only played 4 minutes of senior football across the course of his career so far, which was in 2024-25. He's been involved in a couple of matchday squads, I believe, this season for Leeds United, but ultimately he's not quite at the level where he's going to be playing in the Premier League. Now, some of you may know Harry as a result of his brother Archie, who I believe plays at Spurs. Obviously a very, very good performer there. But it's one of those moves which I don't know how much I agree with it. It's not a move that I necessarily think is one that makes sense for Derby County, if I'm completely honest. Now, this season he's played 9 times, scored 7 goals, got 2 assists, 761 minutes across the course of youth competitions, 5 goals and 1 assist in 6 PL2 games, 2 goals, 1 assist in the EFL Trophy, and 1 appearance with no goals, no assists in 60 minutes in the International Cup. Now, in terms of Derby County, here's a player who plays across the front lines. So if we want to look at who he could replace or who he could be involved with in that sort of position, you go and look at players like Carlton Morris, you look at Patrick Adjumang, you look at Lars-Jørgen Selverson and Ben Brereton-Diaz, you look at Brian Brewster, Vyman, those sort of players. And for me, I just don't see why Derby County would make this move or why they'd even try and get this move on the cards for me. I don't think it's one which really makes sense. Unless there's an expectation that Diaz gets recalled or something like that, I just don't see why this move would happen, if that makes sense. Now, don't get me wrong, I anticipate that Owen Beck probably will end up leaving in January as a result of his injury situation. And obviously you've got David Ozo, who's currently got an injury as well. We don't know the length of that. So there's many different situations here which open up the door for Derby County to move players on to bring in Harry Gray. But I just don't necessarily think it's one that we need. Now, obviously, he has a ton of potential. That's why he's been around the Leeds first team this year. And that's why he's been around sort of that Leeds first team picture since, the ages of 14, 15. But the problem for me that comes with a move like this is that we're then having to get rid of players who we know what they can do for a player who we don't necessarily know what to expect from them either. And I don't necessarily think that's the right way to go for Derby. Now, obviously, as of sitting here right now, Derby County off the back of 5 wins on the spin, face up against Watford in just under a week's time at Pride Park Stadium. Now, obviously, if any move does happen, there's a fair few games between here and then before we can even think about this deal actually being done. But the big thing that we have to discuss in that regard is it the right move? Is it what Derby County need? And I think, as a Derby County fan, what this squad needs is a left-back, central midfielder, and probably some more players who can play in that role in behind the likes of Carlton Morris and Lars-Jørgen Selverson. And I just don't necessarily think that Harry Gray necessarily fits into the necessary needs of Derby County, if that makes sense. Now, don't get me wrong, if Derby County do bring him in, he will be fully backed by me, 100%. You go back to last year, Derby County brought in Harrison Armstrong in a similar sort of position, not much first team football, in and around the Everton first team. Harrison Armstrong went on to be an absolute superstar, who's obviously then gone on to play at Preston North End, who are currently sat 4th in the division. And he's been a huge part of that over the course of the last 8 games or so, where he's been a starter. But is that going to be the same for Harry Gray? I'm not sure. Now, at national level, he's got 5 caps and 1 goal for England's under-17s. It's claimed that he's a centre-forward as per transfer market. However, I'm under the impression he can probably play across that front 3. But it's a difficult one. It's one that is really hard to understand for me, and it's one which I don't necessarily think is the right way to go for Derby. And I think all of us will agree on that, is that we don't necessarily need an attacker, especially not a striker. I think we've got plenty of options in that position. Genuinely, I just don't think that's a position we need. Like, if we go through all the players in Derby's first team squad that can play up front, you've got Ryan Brewster, Andreas Weimann, Diaz, Agyemang, Morris, Selverson, Caden Jackson. If you want to look at academy-wise, you've got Lennon Wheeldon. Corey Blackett-Taylor could probably do a job up there, worst case. So it's an interesting situation, in my opinion, for Derby County to be keeping an eye on Harry Gray. But what we're going to have to wait and see is if Derby County do get this deal done, and if it's a deal which actually then comes to fruition of something that we need in the club, to be quite honest with you. And I don't necessarily believe that that is the right thing for Derby County. Now, obviously, everyone will have their own opinion. I imagine there's probably a few Leeds fans who may stumble across this video, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Harry Gray. Obviously not quite at the level of his brother, who I think at 16-17 was playing for Leeds United's first team. So we are going to have to sort of wait and see what does happen, but it is something which could happen. And I personally don't think he'll end up at Derby. I think if you look at the other clubs interested, Charlton, Swansea, Hull, I think they probably need a little bit more in that forward department in order to get this deal over the line, essentially. So it's one of those for me. If he comes to Derby, I wouldn't anticipate him to play, especially not first team. Whereas if he goes to one of those other clubs, I think there's definitely an opportunity that he could get that sort of opportunity to move forward. Now, obviously, in that same regard, if he does join Derby County, do I think he's going to play much football? The answer to that, in my opinion, is no. I do think that he would 100% be a backup option unless Derby County go through some severe injury crisis or end up like with suspensions in the forward line, which I think for the most part is very unlikely. I'm not saying suspensions won't happen. I think Carlton Morris is on 4 yellow cards at the moment, but it's definitely one of those situations where you look at it and go, do we necessarily need a 17-year-old forward to join the club? And I think the answer to that is no. I'd much rather give an opportunity to a Lennon Wheeldon, a Dejan Brown, a Cruz Allen, a Justin Ogantolu, something along those lines, than bringing in somebody else's talent to improve, if that makes sense. Now, you can obviously let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments if you have not done so already. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.